Chapter 4. San Miguel de los Colorados. For 90 cents a day, you could hire a horse for the ride into San Miguel. Dorothy and I each mounted one of these small creatures that looked to us more like ponies. We were told they were very good at coping with jungle mud, whereas standard-sized horses would never have managed. We stuffed as much as we could into saddlebags and loaded the rest in kerosene boxes on mules. We rode for 3 hours through mud. Sometimes the mud nearly reached the horses' bellies, and we had mud up to our knees. It was a very wide trail, for each horse kept to the edge, avoiding the worst sloughs as much as possible, and in this way widened it continuously. There was jungle on both sides, with only an occasional clearing with a house or plantation. It was a beautiful forest, giant trees and ferns and elephant ears crowding each other in unimaginable luxuriance, draped with vines and flowering plants that gave forth unexpectedly sweet scents. The great breadfruit spread its huge, dark, glossy leaves beside the trail and drooped its heavy brown globes into the mud. Weird and wonderful birds showed themselves to us for brief instances, as if to say, "You see, you are in the jungle. Here we are." We never saw them again, so we wondered if we had been imagining them. I think I heard the call of a bellbird once. We met few people. A man following a donkey loaded with raspadura, big balls of dark brown sugar wrapped in leaves. A man following a donkey on which a woman was riding. A boy with a couple of loaded mules. Several men alone carrying something on their backs. They greeted us and went on their way. A woman called out from one of the houses, "Buenos tardes." We did not know it then, but these people were expecting us. Word had reached them that 2 or more señoritas were coming, and since they monitored every traveler on the road, they knew we were the señoritas. In the early afternoon we reached the village of San Miguel de los Colorados. It was nothing more than a large clearing, perhaps 200 feet in diameter, thickly grown with tall grass and set about with 6 or 8 houses. 2 of the houses were enormous barn-like buildings with overhanging thatched roofs. Next to one of them was a neat frame house with a fence in good repair. E.T. had told us what to look for, and we went to the frame house. As we approached the yard, the door burst open, and a young woman in a flowered cotton dress came flying out, hailing us with a stream of British English, which we could not understand from a distance. This was Doreen Clifford, one of 2 English women who had been here for several years trying to evangelize the Colorados. I had met Doreen in Quito, and before that in New York, when she was on furlough, and I heard her speak to a group of churchwomen. Her first words in that church meeting, spoken in a high impassioned tone, were, "Now if any of you ladies go to sleep, I shall immediately awaken you with tales of snakes, bats, and sewing up drunken Indians in the middle of the night." None of them went to sleep. She was about 30 years old, slim, brown-haired, high-spirited, and very earnest. "Oh, I say," she cried in her high-pitched voice as she came towards us, "welcome to San Miguel on the mud." We rode through the gate and dismounted, and she took the horses' halters and laid them over a fence post. Another young woman came around the side of the house then, smiling in a rather shy and dreamy way, and we were introduced. This was Barbara Edwards, about 25, of medium height and heavier figure than Doreen, with very wavy brown blonde hair, which she had pulled back as tightly as possible into a bun, but feathery ringlets had escaped the bun and curled around her ears and temples. Both had very fair skin that showed up hundreds of gnat bites on arms and legs. Barbara, too, was wearing a flowered cotton dress that looked as though it had not seen an iron. Both wore tennis shoes, Barbara's white, Doreen's dark brown and snub-toed. Doreen invited us inside and showed us around. She had a clinic on the first floor. She had taken a course in missionary medicine she called it, in London, and had cupboards full of bottles and instruments, an examining table with a bona fide dentist's chair. The rest of the first floor was given to dormitory rooms for schoolgirls. It was her dream to have a Colorado school, but until she could start that, she had taken in white children who needed a place to board while attending the mission school. She opened a door marked Privado, and we went up a flight of wooden steps to her living quarters, a large, pleasant room screened on 3 sides furnished with a few homemade chairs, a folding canvas deck chair, a table or two, a trunk, and a couple of stacks of boxes covered with flowered cretonne. She had curtains and pillows, all of different patterns and colors. In England, she told us, they liked as many patterns as they could get together in one room. It looked a little frantic to me, but it was better than no color at all. A bedroom was partitioned off, containing a real bed with springs that she had brought from England, and another stack of covered boxes that served as a dresser. There was a sort of lean-to kitchen at the back with a fourgon and several small brass gasoline pressure stoves. A very adequate array of cooking utensils hung on nails above the counter, which was of well-scrubbed board. There was even a little pink plastic sink, also brought from England, in one corner. She had a clothesline that ran from her back door to a pulley attached to a tree so that she could hang up her clothes without going downstairs. It discouraged thieves as well, she explained. I felt reassured in this pleasant house. Doreen had aimed at a modicum of comfort, coziness, and color, and my spirits were lifted. Barbara was still outside. From the window I watched her unsaddling the horses, leading them to pasture, lugging the muddied saddles and bridles into the house. The filmy flowered dress seemed an odd choice for such an occupation, but I soon learned that my own pants and boots were thought very odd indeed. Dresses were the only accepted attire amongst women of the clearing. Barbara had spoken hardly at all, but I recognized that here were two very different women. They dressed alike, they were English, they had wavy hair, and there the resemblances ended. They lived in separate houses and, I would learn, went their separate ways. When the girl who was working in the kitchen said that lunch was ready, we sat down to a table covered with a green and orange plaid tablecloth. I remember the menu: spinach soup, rice, fried eggs, and tea. There was a pitcher containing cooled boiled milk for our tea, covered with a scalloped crocheted doily, weighted around the edges with glass beads. It was a very hot day, but inside the thatch-roofed house it was relatively cool. It was a strange meal. We were a strange random assortment to have gathered in such a place, but we were drawn together in a unity of purpose. Doreen did most of the talking. She had been in San Miguel the longest, having come from Birmingham, England, when E.T. and Vera had first settled here. What sort of home she had left in order to do this she did not tell us, or what she had given up or gained in becoming a missionary. We knew only that she had studied medicine and gone on to Bible school, and that her heart was here with the Colorado Indians. She told some appalling tales of that first year when she lived in a miserable shack with E.T. and Vera and their first child. Vera had been pregnant, and E.T. had been gone most of the time, traveling to Quito to buy supplies for building a decent house, his journeys hampered by rain, avalanches, and illnesses. Doreen herself had almost more close communion than she could stand, and it had been quite a year. But now here we were, drinking tea together over the green and orange tablecloth, discussing the work we would all do. At last, I thought, under God, we would surely do wonders. Barbara took us to see her house after lunch. It was a big splintery-looking box that stood high on ungainly legs. The walls were of split bamboo, the roof of thatch, very thick and heavy and sodden-looking with greenish moss growing on it. We climbed a flight of steps that were hardly less steep and precarious than a ladder. There was little in the way of furniture, a bed and a few benches, and the inevitable fourgon. Clearly, comfort was not of much importance to Barbara. She laughed and dismissed the house with a wave of her hand. "I'm afraid you've seen it all now. Not awfully inviting, is it?" She had not been here as long as Doreen, and had not had E.T.'s services as a carpenter and builder, but she appeared quite happy with what she called home. There was an open platform at the top of the stairs that could be called a porch. We stood and looked over the clearing, which was called San Miguel de los Colorados. There were no Colorados anywhere. Of the houses we could see, a few were like Barbara's, a few were without stilts, and there were the two barn-like ones, one of which was to be ours. The Colorados lived back in the forests, Barbara said, miles away, but they rode through here on their way to Santo Domingo. You could say they were within reach. It is a thrilling thing when you are young to imagine what good things you will be doing in the world, and what the world will do to you. It is easy to picture life as pleasant. It is probably even more thrilling if you believe in God and believe that He Himself has called you to do a work for Him in a certain place. San Miguel was the place I had been called. These women were to be my associates, and the invisible Colorados would soon be visible, and work would begin. All was ordered and arranged.